From the medical team sitting on standby despite heavy bleeding, to the octagon being painted with blood, the UFC has had its fair share of dark moments. For starters, there's Mark Hunt versus Antonio Bigfoot Silva. I doubt that you've ever witnessed two giants weighing 265 pounds, pound for 25 minutes, quite like Mark Hunt and Antonio Silva did at UFC 193. As one of the greatest heavyweight fights ever, the contest will go down in history. Silva is a tough man, no doubt about that. But no one was counting on him to take all of Hunt's bombs. Silva was devouring the shots like cupcakes, although most people would have fallen after the first one. Even flyweight boxers would be envious of how close both competitors came to completing the battle. Despite the fact that both competitors were heavily bleeding, the medical team continued the bout. But that's just the start of how dark these fights can get. Another great example is Rory MacDonald versus Robbie Lawler. The MMA battle which took place that evening in Vegas will go down in history as one of the most brutal and perhaps the most thrilling ever. Let's not forget, this is the same fight that was awarded the 2015 Fight of the Year award for the welterweight championship contest. Lawler, a veteran of numerous fights and brawls, approaches things more carefully than the Canadian sensation. Having said that, I'll never know what compelled MacDonald to agree to a blow-by-blow contest with the champion. Fans across the world just adore every second of this brutal conflict, despite the fact that he may still be second-guessing his choice. The next fight was so brutal, it even surprised Joe Rogan. Yep, I'm talking about Jeremy Stephens versus Esteban Payan. This is not the fight you want to show your lady when trying to convince her to start watching mixed martial arts. These are the words of UFC commentator Joe Rogan during the live broadcast, so you better understand the fight is violent AF. Jeremy Stephens can knock someone out from nearly any position because of his insane punching strength. He met Esteban Payan, a promotional newbie in UFC 160. Stephens delivered a nasty elbow to Payan to welcome him into the promotion right away, badly cutting his forehead. The worst is yet to come, though. Stephens moved to the mat in the second and began blasting with his GNP ability. Payan was choking on his own blood after the bombardment of savage elbows. To his credit, he persevered and ultimately lost perhaps 2 liters of blood. But that's still not as bloody as this next fight as Jay Hiron versus Jonathan Goulet. Perhaps the bloodiest battle in the history of Ultimate Fighter took place between 2 up-and-coming fighters making their way through the competition. Hiron put on a show by showcasing a great wrestling game in the opening round. But Goulet only needed 1 knee to the head to cause a large wound in the second. Hiron was bleeding profusely, even though he was in control and striking blows. Many believe the physician would end the match because of the blood all over the octagon. To everyone's amazement, though, the action went on. In the first minute of the third, Goulet delivered 1 more knee, which caused the referee to call time on the action. And this next fight isn't less violent. In fact, many remember BJ Penn versus Joe Stevenson as one of the UFC's most brutal. One of BJ Penn's best performances to date was the fight with Joe Stevenson at UFC 80. Penn quickly had the upper hand in the contest. He delivered a vicious elbow, with less than a minute remaining in the first round, opening Stevenson's brow. The American was literally blinded by the volume of blood flowing out. Between rounds, the cut man's hands were full, and Stevenson returned for more. Penn, though, took him down again and finished the fight with a submission. The most famous scene was Penn choking Stevenson while blood was oozing from his forehead. And if you think you've heard it all, wait till you hear about the next encounter between Stefan Struve and his opponent, Denis Stojnic. Struve, who's 7 feet tall, is conceivably the tallest UFC competitor ever. But unfortunately, his insane height has a huge flaw. He struggled to defend takedowns. And in his battle with Stojnic at UFC 99, this almost proved fatal. After taking down Struve early, Stojnic dominated Struve on the ground for most of the round. A large gash was made on Struve's bald skull by a forceful hammer fist in the final minute of the round. It honestly looked like someone had dug the Suez Canal right into his forehead. The Dutchman would get it through the opening round, but Stojnic would pick it up where he left off in the second round. Things grew desperate for the skyscraper as blood poured from his skull. His head looked like a leaking water balloon, except it wasn't water. Fortunately, he was able to shift into the submission posture and do the Hail Mary. This next fight involves 2 of the UFC's hardest competitors. Yep, I'm talking about Jim Miller versus Joe Lawson. Lawson is one of the most thrilling as well, having earned 15 post-fight bonuses. At UFC 155, the competitors soon gave the crowd what they wanted by biting their mouthpieces, throwing their defense out the window, and exploding in their pockets. Miller scored early in the opening round with a powerful knee and elbow behind. On Lawson's forehead, 2 significant cuts appeared right away. The sights that followed weren't suitable for anybody with a sensitive stomach. With blood in his eyes, lips, and nose, Lawson was forced to spend the remainder of the round on his back. Trust me when I say it wasn't an easy sight to watch. In between rounds, the physician gave Lawson the all-clear to proceed. A cut under Miller's eye shortly afterward caused the struggle to turn into a drenching of blood. He made a choice in the epic battle, but they both gained the hearts of the audience. And let's not forget, there's another really brutal fight involving Silva. Cain Velasquez versus Antonio Silva. Velasquez badly needed the fight to put him back in the mix after Junior Dos Santos stole his heavyweight title from him. But Antonio Silva blocked his path at UFC 160. The battle will be remembered as one of the most unequal massacres in history. As anticipated, Velasquez got a takedown early on and then exploded in unrelenting ground and pound attacks. Silva was struck with several hard elbows, which immediately coated his face with plasma. The doctor examined the wound before allowing Silva to carry on. Cain kept attacking the wounds, which made the blood spray even more. The battle was then abruptly interrupted by the referee. It appeared like Velasquez was escaping the murder scene because of the blood that was all over the area. Finally, there's a fight involving 2 very bloodthirsty opponents. Of course, I'm talking about Edwin Deweese versus Gideon Ray. It seems like there was a bloodthirsty madman sitting next to the cage during TUF Season 4 rather than medical personnel. The aggression would increase in the second, despite the fact that combatants were being cautious in the first. As soon as Deweese reached the ground, he began hitting Ray with crisp, short elbows. Ray's forehead wound became more visible as a result, and blood began to pour out. The doctor entered, but it appears that this was insufficient to quench his thirst. Even though TUF fights were supposed to last 2 rounds each, the judges ruled a draw, forcing the 2 to go to a 3rd round. Deweese carried on from the second, shattering and concentrating on Ray's head wounds. The most amazing thing was watching Ray use one hand to fight back while using the other to stop the blood from spraying. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the dark side of cage fighting? We'll see you in the next one.